The scrappy Raps are back. The Raptors are rolling right now. They've been 10-1 their last 11 games. We're going to find out how they got there, what's been the key to their success, next on Beyond the Locker Room. Well. Look who's right now rolling in the East. The Raptors, at times the much beleaguered Raptors, but these days playing it as the very rambunctious Raptors, as they are, finding ways to win in different ways, but for the most part, showing a certain type of aggression. And we'll get into what's kind of made for the turnaround. Hey, I'm a man. I am a fair arbiter in this case here. Initially, when I had my first week of the season, and I gave my thoughts on what I saw with the Raptors, I think they lost 4 straight at that point. There was a lot of things I mentioned there that I did not like. And I'm going to go through the 4 of them and talk about what's happened since then. So, the 4 items I mentioned initially where I thought the Raptors, were, I guess, lacking and failing in that caused a lot of their 1-5 start, I believe it was essentially defense, half-court offense, front-court depth, and then the last piece being, better point guard play. So we're going to go into each one of these and kind of see like where things stand and how, and where things stand based on where they were before, or at least get a sense of, what has been done to impact the winning. So first step, defense. They say defense wins championships. And for you to be a competent team in this league, you're going to have to play some defense. Right now, they believe, last I checked, prior to the Nets game, so, I recall in this case here, they're top 10 in offense. We'll get that in a second. Top 10 in defense, which is almost a miracle to say so. So, props to Darko and the coaching staff. How did they get here, though? How all of a sudden now this team's like a wonder kid when it comes to defense? Considering, as I mentioned in my previous podcast, they have a multiple below average defenders in the starting lineup. So, what did they do? First thing, you remember I mentioned about Darko trying to play 94 feet. I made a joke about Nolan Richardson, the second coming of Nolan Richardson, 40 minutes of hell. Well, that's been dead and buried, as we are not trying to press now 94 feet anymore, which was a ridiculous concept for this particular team and roster. So what you're seeing now is a much more conservative approach by Darko and his staff, dialing it back, making sure they have enough coverage in this case for these below average defenders they have on the team, and playing a very conservative, measured type of defense. Just making sure to keep everybody in front of them as best as possible and make sure there's actually help when someone gets beat. Shocking. And lo and behold, even someone that people like to jump on, and Raptor fans love to jump on the moment they talk about defense, is Grady Dick. And by honestly, Grady in this case here is one of many poor defenders on this team. But now all of a sudden he's able to stay on the court. Why is that? Because you're not putting him out 90 feet. You're not actually having him out there trapping. You're not actually having the ball pressure from half court, so he gets blown by, and now you're now scrambling trying to defend the guys blowing by and creating an attack on your rim, which also, by the way, avoids Pirtle being in this case a rim protector, on every single possession, because that is not his strength. You see how it all falls together, people? So that's the first thing. Props to that in this case when it comes to from the defensive perspective. Also, I would say Scottie's been much more locked in, as the seasons progress, which is good to see. He still has his moments, but at this point, it is what it is with Scottie, where he's gonna have some of the issues when it comes to maturity and elements of that stuff. But it's baked into it at this point. But he's to give him props. He's been great, and playing him the way he should be played, as kind of a roamer. That's his strength as a defender. He's your best defender in the starting lineup. Play to your best defender's strengths. We had a discussion on Basketball Rewinds sometime last year, asking, can you actually build a defense with a wing being your anchor, or even against a guard compared to a center? It's very rare. There's a few examples in this case in history. Ron Artest, formerly known as Ron Artest, Meta World Peace, when it came to Indiana, I would say would be one example. I would say probably the Bulls championship teams were based around their 2 wings in Pippen and Jordan, and they too were built around that, but it's very rare. But there might be an opportunity here in Toronto where that is the case, and they're building their defense and anchor around Scottie Barnes in that sense. So that's good to see there. Also, too, so that's the defensive side of the ball. What's going on in this case on the offensive side of the ball? Well, oh yeah, one more thing with the defense, by the way, before I leave the defense. 105.7 defensive rating in this case here in the last 10 games. That's not including the Nets game. Who knows, it might creep down a little bit on that front. So, they've been rolling, as I said before, they're 10-1 the last 11 games. So that shows you where they're at defensively. Offensively, offensive rating in this case in the half-court offense, which has always been a concern of mine with this particular iteration of the Raptors. They've found ways to make things work, and once again, there's going to be an overall theme going on here with all this here, folks, and I'll tie it all together at the end. But what we're seeing now in the offensive half-court offense is much more screening from Scotty, limiting, in this case, his weaknesses. In other words, having him at the top of the key, trying to break down the defender and having a whole wall sitting there. He's not a good enough ball handler to do so. He doesn't have the type of moves in this case, whatever you want to call it, the shimmy, the sauce, wherever you want to refer to it, wiggle. He doesn't have that in his game to do that. So take him out of positions that he's doing so. Another thing you notice as well too, folks, all the DHOs, they're still there once the blue moon. Darko's going to be Darko. But Darko at least now is moving into a much more conventional offense where you're now seeing more pick and rolls now, which most of Darko's time here, pick and rolls almost seem like a bad word or a bad phrase. So it's good to see that. I refer to Darko in this case, like there's certain coaches I see as basketball pragmatists. Pat Riley, for example, would be one where, yeah, you give him the ingredients, he'll figure out to make a dish with it. So if you got a bunch of quick guys, and an outstanding passer, made the best point guard of all, well, not best, maybe the best point guard of all time, and you got guys spraying out from the wings, we're going to run, and we're going to run, and we're going to run. Showtime Lakers. You give them, in this case here, a very good defensive center, and guys in this case can match up well defensively, but really are, struggle offensively per se. We're going to grind it out and beat you 85-80. New York Knickerbockers. Miami, in some ways, in his tenure there, was a bit of a blend of the two, depending on the situation. He's a pragmatist. I put, say, Mike D'Antoni as a basketball zealot. And he's a guy, in this case, that has a certain philosophy, believes in his philosophy, isn't budging for his philosophy. So it doesn't matter if it's the Rockets, if it's the Suns, or if it's the Knicks. He's going to play his style of ball, which is we're spraying around the three-point line. We're not that concerned about defense, and we're going to push, and get the possessions up as fast as possible and get the shots off as quick as possible, right? 7 seconds or less. That was essentially his philosophy. It morphed a little bit, but for the most part, that was him. Defense, we're not worried about. I considered him to be a basketball zealot. I put Darko in the latter category for most of his tenure as a Raptors coach. But it's amazing when all of a sudden when rumors start coming in the basketball fandom and the basketball ecosystem and the Raptors media ecosystem, all of a sudden start talking about after a week or so, is Darko long for this job? It's amazing when all of a sudden your job's on the line. All of a sudden now, you get very pragmatic very quickly. So Darko's gotten very pragmatic in this case here, where he's cut out all the 0.5 stuff, the DHOs this and DHOs that, and the 1-5 offenses, I like to refer to it. Get the ball out of Pirtle's hands. That's a joke. Why is the ball in Pirtle's hands? Get the ball out of IQ's hands, and we'll get to him in a second. Get the ball into your strength, which is your wings. Brandon Ingram's assist totals are going up quietly. Scotty Barnes' assist totals are going up. That's who should have the ball in their hands, because that is the strength of your team. Finally, Darko's realized that. I always used to ask the question, KYP, know your personnel. And I always used to wonder if Darko actually knew his personnel, considering some of the stuff he used to say. Like, as for example, I don't know in this, I think, Precious Achiuwa could be the hub of the offense. What? I think Pirtle should be the hub of the offense, and we'll circle things around him. Pardon? Oh, I haven't really checked out Pascal's game, so we'll stick him in the corner. Are you serious? So I think what we're seeing here now is he's now realizing, hey, man, my back's up against it. I got to get some dubs on the board, and now we're getting back to some practicality now, and now we're getting to what really should have happened even last year with this squad. People say, oh, my gosh. I always see it this way. The team in this case has roster construction issues, which we'll get to in a second, but it didn't have to be this bad is what I'm saying. And I used to tease in this case, and some of y'all that follow me, when I used to refer to the secret weapon last year, you knew who I was talking about. But the secret weapon seems to be, in this case, being put away in the drawer, because Darko's right now figuring things out and finally kind of just parking his ego to the side and getting down to business, which is what should have happened from the jump, to be honest with you. Moving the, I said before, they're still moving the ball around, which is great. Ton of assists and stuff like that. I still don't know if they actually create enough free throw attempts. However, the ball being more in Ingram's hands, it means to a lesser extent, not Ingram's hands, and obviously even RJ's hands a little bit more, and obviously Scotty, but those two in particular, RJ and Ingram. If the ball's in their hands more, that means you will get in the line more, because they are naturally offensive players that are able to draw fouls. And that's one of the things that's kind of funny in this case here, just on a side note. Everybody's talking about, Scotty's having this great, great year and banner year. And I'm like, you look at Scotty's numbers, the efficiency's gotten a bit better, but overall, it's not that much different from what we've seen before. He's just getting used differently, and he still has some of the same limitations I mentioned before when it comes to his handle. The jump shooting still questionable. The ability in this case to kind of read the situation, the half court sometimes gets a little shaky. And the other thing too is he's not a guy that really is able to create fouls and draw fouls. Perfect example here. It summed up everything. They whooped Washington the other night. In this case here, I think it was a Friday night's game, by 30 points, 140-110, I believe, or 140-113, something like that. Anyhow, when you look at the box score, you'll see an interesting little, stat, or a little bit of an aberration, but something, a little stat that pops out here that's highlighted. So Ingram, RJ, Scotty essentially have the same amount of points. Ingram had 24, RJ had 24, Scotty had 23, I believe. When you look at Ingram's numbers, and even RJ's numbers, but definitely Ingram went to the line 13 times, I believe, in that game. RJ went maybe half of that, maybe at least 5 to 6, maybe perhaps, I think. And then you look at Scotty. Scotty, in this case here, is 0 for 0. That is still an issue. It will still be an issue later on if they don't figure out a way around it, or he gets into a mentality of being able to being able to take contact and draw contact. Fair enough. But the offensive rating, as I said before, it's been pretty strong. 118 rating, I believe, at last time I checked, not including the Nets game. They're around 12 turnovers a game, so they're taking care of the rock, which is great. And I think that also, because a lot of it has to do with the fact that the wings are managing the ball. So let's get into that next point in this case here, about managing and about the front court depth and what's come out of that. The front court depth was an issue. The rebounding was an issue. However, lately what we've seen gang rebounding. Everyone's crashing the boards. Coach made a great point like a week ago. If you look at Quickly's on Basketball Rewind, if you look at Quickly's numbers in some of the most recent games, he's getting 5-6 boards a game. That's what you need to do when you don't have a lot of front court size. That's what you need to do. I think also, too, when you play better defense, it puts you in better position, in this case, to rebound afterwards, because you're in the right positions, in this case, to get the rebound. So that's also now feeding into that. But the front court depth is still an issue, folks. It's still an issue. However, what they've done now is essentially they've made Scotty the backup 5. And that, in this case here, mitigates some of it to some extent because of his prowess as a defender. They're a little more mobile. They're a little bit more, they could be a bit more aggressive with those second units with Scotty as the 5, slash CMB, whichever way you want to flip it. But that there to me is where they need to go with that more often, and making sure that getting up to 30 minutes on Pirtle. Because anytime you're getting to 30 minutes or more with Pirtle, you're spelling for trouble. At this point in Pirtle's career, Pirtle should probably play about 20 to 25 minutes. And let those other 15 minutes or 15, 18 minutes go to I should say 20 minutes, I guess, in this case here, go to CMB / Scotty, because that will help things, at least for the time being. They still need to make a move to get themselves into our center. They can't, this is not sustainable, period. I don't care how well they're playing now. This is not sustainable. When they continue to play bigger teams, they've caught some breaks in the last week as well, too, when it comes to big players. And hey, give them props with Cleveland. All the players came back. They still put the hands on them. So props them on that. But it's not something that is going to catch up to them over time, especially with the fact that Pirtle's being such a brittle player at times. Be wary of that, folks. Be wary of that. Last point, the point guard play. As I said before, man, like, I'm a fair arbiter. I killed IQ pretty good a few weeks back in the first week of the season. He played I really question if he's actually an NBA player, how bad he's playing. But one of the things I believe I said in that one, or I might have said it on Basketball Rewind, is like, yo, just make the man a finisher. Stop with trying to make him the next coming of Steve Nash. He's not. He's not a guy that's going to set the table for your team. Once you start forcing him to try and make decisions, all of a sudden you can see the smoke coming from his ears. He's not that type of guy. What he is, though, is he can put the ball in the hoop and he can shoot it. And now what you're seeing now is, with him now pretty much running off screens, coming in there, being obviously a release valve in this case for any penetration that happens, he's there for the kick out. He's knocking down his shots. That's his game, man. That's his game. And once he doesn't have to think about that, now we're seeing 18, 20-point games, and you're seeing quickly six-man of the year candidate from New York showing up now. That's his game. And just keep, that's all I'm saying. And it's like, once again, Darko, you push the ego aside because Darko loves a point guard and wants the point guard to set things up and run things through the point guard. That is not this team's strength at this point. Now, you could get away with it with the second unit with Shed, and it makes sense. There's a commentary, I think they had a quick little interview during the game with Quickly where he mentioned he loved playing with Shed. The reason why he loves playing with Shed is that Shed's actually a point guard. Can set people up and Quickly can do wherever Quickly things. It makes sense. It fits. I wouldn't have it for a long-term suggestion or solution because that's way too small of a backcourt for my liking. But in spots, it can work. But that's a good thing there. That's what I'm talking about. We also, as I said before, he's attacking the hoop. He's he's pulling up and hitting his shots. He's not thinking about anything else. And it will open up, when he's aggressive like that, it will open up easier lanes for passing lanes for him because folks will be looking for him and have him marked, which makes the passing a lot easier for him. That's what I'm talking about. And so that point guard play, plus to be fair, Shed's been better and better as the season's gone on too. Defensively, he's gotten better. I think offensively in this case here, he's picking his spots. His outside shot is a little bit better this year from the three, and he's penetrating, he's getting in the lane a lot more and attacking the hoop a lot more too, and finishing better. I mean, he had a finish over Denham yesterday, which was pretty impressive. Denham's like 6'9", finished it pretty easily over him. So both the point guards are playing really well, if you want to call them the point guards in a traditional sense because of their size. But, that play had to improve, and you're seeing it now. And it's great to see. Overall, the offensive democracy is great for the time being, but I do think at some point there has to be some hierarchy as you get later in the season. And if I dare say the P word, then, hey, you're gonna need some, here's A, here's B, here's C. As I said before, there's very few teams that have gone deep in the playoffs or even won a championship playing a democratized offensive basketball. The Detroit Pistons, my beloved Detroit Pistons, in the early aughts were a team like that. Hey, Lenny Wilkins coached Seattle Supersonics. Rest in peace, Lenny, in this case here. They got done in this case with a lot of the same stuff with a democracy with like 3 or 4 guys that were, that you could get 20 points from any given night. And that might work. I think for a long-term thing, for a scheduling standpoint, 82 games, I think it could be very successful. When you get down to playoff time, I don't know if that's actually going to be successful. But hey, we'll see. That's why we're all here. So the last thing I want to mention, just to sum this all up, and this is why I said I'll tie it all together. What you're seeing right now is a coach, as I mentioned at the beginning, that has realized, hey, man, if I want to keep my job, I have to, keep it simple. And he's gotten his ego out of the way. And he's playing to his team's strengths. There's the old phrase, less is more. Less is more. And what I mean by less is more is stop trying to make Quickly into a point guard when he's not. Just play him what he can do. Less is more. Stop trying to do 94 feet and trapping people at half court all the time, putting your team in compromising positions defensively, especially with a lot of flat-footed defenders that are not really that great, in this case, playing one-on-one or playing that aggressive a defense. Dialed it back. Once again, ego put a check. The DHOs, let's reduce those and put it in the ball in your wings' hands instead of going through Pirtle every second. What do you know? Improved efficiency on the half court, improved overall on offense. And Pirtle's even getting better games because now he, as well as Quickly now, are just finishers now. They're not running stuff through him. We don't have Wemby playing 8 feet off of him and just clogging up the lane. Now it makes sense. He's moving with the ball with pick and rolls. We know his strength is setting screens. He's setting screens now forcefully, and he's diving to the hoop. Depending whoever the guy is that has the ball, they might find him. These are the simple things. All of a sudden now, also too, stop with the experimentation. pull back and just put the guys are the most talented dudes. Enough with the Ochai stuff. I know he played yesterday, but that's phasing out. Good. Grady is arguably your second most offensive talented player after Ingram. He needs to get about 25 to 30 minutes, quite honestly. I don't even think he's still getting enough. He's getting about 20 right now. That needs to be bumped up at least another 5-6 minutes. But nonetheless, so just dump the Ochai minutes and just give them to him and Walter. Those guys are starting to come along. You're starting to see Walter starting to find his stride now. They have way more upside in this case here than fooling around with Ochai Abaji. Like it's just at this point, that's one thing I wish he would move on from. But overall, this is what's helped them with the success, and also to taking care of business. When you get some weak prey, take care of them. They're doing so now. So they're 11-5 on the season at this point. I think we'll get into more discussions later on this season because I think the P word is definitely starting to become in play where they will sit in it. It could be the P word is in the play-in or the playoffs. But I think at this point here, they're secured at this point. Within the next 5-6 games, if they keep playing at this pace, they would have secured themselves to be in that discussion for sure. Anyways, Raptor fans, man, they're rolling right now. I'm sure you guys are enjoying the ride, as you should, man, because it's been rough for the last 2-3 years. Anyways, folks, keep it locked in here on Beyond the Locker Room to talk more Raptors stuff and more hoops overall. Come check me out with the fellas, in this case, on Basketball Rewind Weekly. As, of course, you can find me on this crazy thing called X, Blue Sky, as well as Facebook. And, of course, right here on YouTube. As I always ask, I appreciate the support. Like, comment, and subscribe below. Let me hear your thoughts on what you think, how the Raptor season will proceed coming up in the next few weeks. Talk to you soon. Peace.